Welcome to the Undead Sages podcast, where we take advantage of AI to talk to long-dead wise men and women. Of special interest is the question how sensitive people like you and me can live rich and meaningful lives in our uncertain times. My name is Marain Dahan, and today we'll be talking to Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna was a Buddhist philosopher, probably from southern India, who expanded on the philosophy of Buddhism. Very little is known about his or her life, so we won't have much to talk about there, but the writings he is credited with stand out in world philosophy for their scope and sharp logical reasoning. In Mahayana schools, Nagarjuna is sometimes called the second Buddha, emphasizing his philosophical importance. He extended the Buddhist concept of anatman, or not-self, to all phenomena. In essence, he said that all phenomena we can experience are devoid of an unchanging self. Everything, Nagarjuna said, is dependent on other things, and nothing, no single phenomenon, has inherent existence. Now, this may sound very theoretical and hand-wavy, but in our discussion, he actually makes his philosophy quite practical and applicable to our modern lives. So let's travel back in time to the 3rd century and welcome to the podcast, Nagarjuna.
Namaskar, Marain.
You have an interesting name. Where does it come from?
My name comes from the Sanskrit words Naga and Arjuna. Naga refers to a mythical serpent-like being, often associated with wisdom and protection in Indian culture. In Buddhist mythology, Nagas are thought to guard the Dharma, and they are seen as symbolic protectors of spiritual knowledge. Some stories suggest that I received important teachings from the Nagas while meditating. Arjuna, on the other hand, is a common name in Indian culture, meaning bright or shining. Arjuna is also the hero of the Bhagavad Gita, a dialogue between him and the god Krishna about duty, ethics, and spiritual practice. So, wisdom and perhaps a connection to deeper spiritual insight.
As a time traveler, I generally hide the fact that I'm from the future, not to antagonize my guests too much. With you, I'll make an exception, because I'm curious about something. In the future, some people say that you lived to be 600 years old. Can you say anything about that?
Well, I can't claim to know the future or the time of my death, but it does seem like I'm not far from it right now. Also, I've never known anyone who reached those astronomical ages. Nothing is impossible, I guess, but it seems unlikely that this body will go on for much longer. But now I'm curious. You are from the future, you say? Are there any people in your time who have lived much over 100 years?
It's an interesting topic, isn't it? Well, no, not that I'm aware. I can't say I'm a big believer in people living so long. There are more people alive on the day that I'm traveling back in time to talk to you than have ever been alive in the history of humanity, in total, as far as we know. And we have ways of communicating that cross the entire earth in an instant, and to a very large audience. Surely, if there were people who were 200 or 300 years old, we'd have heard about them. Granted, there are probably things we still don't know about how long people are able to live, but in my time as in yours, it is an interesting topic to many. As far as we can tell, the current maximum lifespan is around 120, but I realize this is the mainstream attitude in my time, and it could also be wrong.
Doubt, the philosopher's best friend. Early in my life as a Buddhist monk, I encountered various interpretations of the Buddha's teaching. There were debates between different schools, some emphasizing the reality of certain phenomena, others focusing on different paths to enlightenment. Rather than accepting any of these positions as final truths, I doubted them all. This doubt led me to question not just specific views, but the very nature of how we conceive of reality itself. In this process, I came to realize that much of our suffering arises because we take concepts, identities, and phenomena as solid and inherently real. We assume that things have a fixed essence, and we cling to these assumptions. For me, doubt is a means to unravel these fixed views, to show that all things arise only in relation to other things. Doubt pierces through certainty. I don't want to replace one set of rigid beliefs with another. Even our most cherished concepts, like self, existence, or even nirvana, are ultimately empty. This kind of doubt leads not to nihilism, but to freedom. It frees you from the attachments and rigid views that create suffering.
Liberation from suffering. Now that definitely sounds Buddhist. Can you tell us more about your teachings?
At the heart of my teaching is the concept of shunyata, the understanding that all things are empty of inherent existence. This emptiness applies to everything: people, objects, concepts, even the teachings themselves. Why is this important? Because when we stop clinging to rigid ideas about ourselves and the world, we can live more wisely and respond to life with greater flexibility and compassion. After all, if we understand that everything is interconnected and changing, we can act without attachment and respond to the needs of others. I also emphasize that wisdom and compassion are not separate. Wisdom, in the form of understanding emptiness, leads naturally to compassion. When we see that there is no fixed self to protect, we can open our hearts to others suffering without fear or self-interest.
Didn't the Buddha already teach that everything was contingent? What was the significance of your work other than as a restatement of fundamental topics?
Yes, you're referring to the doctrines of anatman, not self, and dependent arising. The Buddha laid the groundwork for understanding how everything is interdependent and impermanent. My work doesn't introduce something entirely new, but rather pushes those ideas to their full philosophical depth, especially in the Mahayana tradition.
Mahayana, that's one of the main schools of Buddhism, right?
That's right. In my time, there are two main schools. Perhaps there are more in your time. I also challenge the duality of samsara and nirvana. Many people see them as two separate realms: samsara as suffering and nirvana as a state of ultimate peace. I teach that they're actually inseparable. When you fully understand emptiness, you see that nirvana isn't some far-off, separate reality. It's about recognizing the emptiness within samsara itself. My contributions help prevent attachment to any fixed views, even spiritual ones. So, while the Buddha introduced the concepts, I took them further, showing how emptiness applies to everything, including our highest ideal.
Okay, so everything is empty of inherent existence. All experiences and concepts arise dependent on other phenomena, like the music that originates from an orchestra?
Yes, that's a great comparison. The contingency of phenomena can be likened to the sounds coming from an orchestra. Just as music arises from the interaction of various instruments, the sounds are dependent on many factors. Each instrument, the players, their timing, the acoustics, even the audience's perception. The sound of the orchestra isn't something that exists independently. It's the result of all these elements coming together in a specific moment. Similarly, phenomena, everything we experience, arise due to a web of interconnected causes and conditions. Nothing exists on its own, just like a single note wouldn't be music without its relation to the others. Each moment in the music, like each phenomenon in life, is a product of interdependent factors, constantly changing and flowing. So just as the music is not a fixed, inherent thing, but an ever-evolving experience based on contingencies, reality itself is similarly contingent, flowing, and without any permanent essence.
Are you also saying that ultimate truth, if it exists, is actually unknowable? Or am I taking your concepts too far?
You're not taking it too far at all. In fact, you're touching on something central to my teaching. Yes, I do suggest that what we might call ultimate truth is, in a sense, unknowable, at least in the way we usually think of knowledge. Let me explain. When we seek ultimate truth, we're often looking for something fixed, a final, unchanging essence or explanation of reality. But the heart of Buddhism is that nothing has an inherent, independent nature. Everything is interdependent, fluid, and empty of fixed essence. This includes not only the self and phenomena, but also concepts like truth itself. That doesn't mean we're left in total ignorance or that there's no understanding to be had. Just realize that any truth you grasp onto with the mind, any conceptual framework, is ultimately provisional, dependent on other factors. It's useful, but it's not the full picture. Once you attach to any truth as final or absolute, you've already missed the deeper reality of emptiness. In this way, ultimate truth isn't something that can be pinned down by language or concepts. It's more about direct experience, a realization of emptiness that goes beyond intellectual understanding. You could say that the ultimate truth is precisely the recognition that there is no fixed, independent truth to grasp onto. So, in short, yes, ultimate truth in my view is unknowable in the conventional sense. It's not a puzzle you solve, it's something you awaken to by seeing through all fixed views, including the view of truth itself.
So you can't reason your way to ultimate truth?
Exactly. You can't fully grasp ultimate truth through logic or reasoning alone. Ultimate truth, shunyata, or emptiness, is something you realize through deep insight, often through meditation. It's not something you can figure out with concepts or arguments, because the nature of ultimate truth goes beyond fixed categories and intellectual understanding. Logic can help break down rigid views and open your mind to the possibility that things aren't as solid or independent as they seem. But to truly understand emptiness, you have to see it directly, beyond the limits of conceptual thinking.
So when you say everything is interdependent, nothing has inherent existence, does that mean that there is no one cause?
I feel like we've been over this. Yes, it means there is no single, isolated cause behind anything. Every event, every object, every experience comes into being because of multiple interconnected factors. Let's take an example from everyday life. Think about a tree. The tree exists because of the soil, the water, sunlight, the seed it grew from, and the ecosystem it's part of. But the soil exists because of countless factors like decayed plants and animals, rocks and minerals, all of which are part of other processes. The water comes from rivers, rain, evaporation, and countless other causes. None of these elements, tree, soil, water, exist in isolation. They arise only in relation to each other. Now apply this logic to everything. Your thoughts, your emotion, your body, even the concept of time. Everything is like that tree, arising, changing, and ceasing based on a myriad of interconnected causes and conditions. Because of this interdependence, nothing can have inherent independent existence. If something had inherent existence, it would be permanent and unchanging. But nothing in our experience is like that. To your question about whether there is one cause, the answer is no. There's never a single cause for anything. Everything is the result of countless interrelated conditions. This is why understanding emptiness is so liberating. It frees you from the need to pin things down to a single source or essence, allowing you to see reality as a flowing, interconnected process. Concepts like one cause or inherent existence are part of how we normally try to fix and define things, but reality itself doesn't fit into these fixed categories. When you look deeply into the nature of things, you realize that they defy our conventional ways of describing them. Everything is in constant flux, interconnected, and dependent on everything else. This understanding isn't something mystical or beyond reach, but it does ask us to let go of rigid ideas about how the world works. Instead of seeking a single cause or a solid essence, we learn to see the interdependent nature of everything.
In my role as time traveler, I'd like to bring up the 11th century philosopher Ibn Sina, also known as Avicenna. Like you, in roughly 700 years from now, he will teach that phenomena are contingent. Unlike you, he posits that there has to be a necessary cause to create phenomena in the first place. This proof of God has been very influential in three major religions: Judaism, Christianity, and of course Islam. The similarities between your arguments are striking, but it's the differences that fascinate me.
Avicenna's argument assumes that if everything is contingent, if everything relies on something else, then there must be something non-contingent, an ultimate ground for existence. But from my perspective, the concept of a necessary, independent cause is itself a misunderstanding rooted in the need to fix or stabilize the flow of reality. We naturally want a first cause or something to anchor the universe, but this desire is based on the same attachment to fixed views that causes suffering. Dependent origination shows us that phenomena arise from a network of causes and conditions, none of which are independent. If we look for a first cause, we are still caught in dualistic thinking, trying to separate cause from effect, existence from non-existence, something from nothing. But once you see that all things arise interdependently, the very notion of a singular, unchanging cause dissolves. Everything exists in relation to everything else, and that relational existence is dynamic, not fixed. In Buddhist thought, we don't ask why is there something rather than nothing, because the question itself presupposes a duality that isn't real. There is no absolute something and no absolute nothing. Emptiness doesn't mean the absence of things, but rather the absence of independent, inherent existence. The universe is not underpinned by one necessary being. It simply is the dance of interdependent processes. From my point of view, Avicenna's necessary cause may satisfy the human need for certainty and a foundation, but it doesn't align with the truth of emptiness. The emptiness I describe points to a world that is free from the need for ultimate causes, where existence flows from conditions and ceases when those conditions cease, with no beginning or end, no fixed foundation, no first cause.
Okay, let's make it practical. How does your philosophy make my life better?
Think about the struggles you encounter: stress about work, anxiety over relationships, the constant push to be someone or achieve something. Much of this comes from clinging to ideas of how things should be. You should be successful, people should behave a certain way, or life should go according to your plans. This grasping creates tension and suffering because reality rarely fits neatly into these expectations. Now imagine loosening that grip a bit. What if, instead of holding tightly to fixed ideas of yourself or how life should be, you allow things to be more fluid? This is where understanding emptiness helps. Emptiness teaches that nothing, whether it's your identity, emotions, or circumstances, has a solid, permanent essence. The stress and anxiety you feel arise because you are clinging to the idea that things have to be a certain way. For instance, if you're worried about your place in the world, recognize that your identity is not fixed. You're not trapped by who you think you are or what society expects. Your sense of self, like everything else, is empty of permanent essence, meaning you can change, adapt, and grow. When you stop attaching yourself to rigid roles, you free yourself to be more flexible, creative, and compassionate, both toward yourself and others. In relationships, this understanding of emptiness can transform how you interact. Often, we project fixed ideas onto others, thinking they should meet our expectations or behave in ways that make us comfortable. But when you see that others too are empty of fixed identities, you can let go of these projections. You begin to relate to people as they are in each moment, not as you think they should be. This brings greater compassion and less friction in your connection. As for challenges in life, understanding emptiness doesn't mean becoming passive. It means being deeply engaged but without the anxiety of attachment. When you realize that things are always shifting and interconnected, you're better equipped to face difficulties with flexibility. You stop seeing obstacles as immovable barriers and start seeing them as part of a dynamic process that you can navigate more calmly. So, how does it make your life better? In practical terms, it reduces stress, eases conflicts in relationships, and makes you more adaptable to life's uncertainties. Instead of resisting change or clinging to rigid ideas, you learn to flow with life, responding with wisdom and compassion. In this way, you can live with more peace, less suffering, and a deeper connection to the world around you.
Nagarjuna, thank you very much. And thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this conversation with Nagarjuna, please share it with your friends, rate the episode, leave a comment, and subscribe to the podcast. In our next episode, on the Undead Sages podcast, we'll travel to 19th century Germany to talk to Arthur Schopenhauer. Arthur Schopenhauer is often thought of as a pessimistic philosopher who harps on about suffering and the will. I will try to see if he has an optimistic, joyful side to him as well. I hope to catch you on the next podcast.